functions one-to-one. If f is one-to-one, then f inverse can be defined. All right? So how do you define, let's suppose we have a one-to-one function, right? How do we define the inverse? Let f be one-to-one function, then f inverse is function such that we have two things, 1 and 2. Number one, we have that f inverse of f of x is equal to x for each x in the domain of f. And two, we have that f of f inverse of x, excuse me, let's not say x, let's say y here. F of f inverse of y is equal to y for each y in the range of f. A picture which I think is helpful is just this. If if this is the domain, and over here is the range, then f goes like this, and f inverse goes like that. I think about x being over here, I think about y being over there, and f goes from the domain to the range, and f inverse goes back from the range to the domain. That's all there is to it. So how do you calculate the formula for the inverse is what you want to know, right? All right. So here's an algorithm that'll work for you. Number one, you're given y equals f of x. All right? You're given the formula for f. Point number one. Then what you do, point number two, is you solve for x equals to stuff in y. All right? That stuff in y defines f inverse of y. So 3 f inverse of y is equal to stuff in y. If you want a formula in terms of x, at that point you can just switch the y to x again at the end. You may have been taught by a different teacher to switch the x and y at the start. I don't teach that because I think it's helpful to have the formula for the inverse in terms of y, because we should really think about x and y coming from different sets. This is especially important in like applications. For example, you could think about Fahrenheit as a function of Celsius versus Celsius as a function of Fahrenheit. And if you use x for both Celsius and Fahrenheit degrees, it's not as helpful as if you say use C for Celsius and F for Fahrenheit. You use different letters for the domain and the range. Okay, let's work an example. Suppose we have f of x equals to the square root of x, right? So following my algorithm, we put y equals to square root of x, right? That's given. And we do what? We solve for x. How do we do that here? How about square both sides, right? So y squared is equal to the square root of x squared, which is x, right? So there's my x equals my stuff in y, quote unquote, is just y squared here. So 3 f inverse of y is equal to what? Y squared. There you go. There's the formula for the inverse. Of course, if you wanted to convert to x, if you want to convert to formula in x, it's easy enough to do. F inverse of x is what? X squared. So what's the domain of f here? So the domain of f in this example is 0 to infinity, right? What's the range? Sorry. It's like the contrast of white on white in this case. The range of f, the range of f is also 0 to infinity. The graph, fine. So the graph, here's y equals square root of x. That's the graph of the function. What's the graph of the inverse look like? If we were to plot it on the same, if we look at, well, no. The thing is the domain. So this is also equal to the range of the inverse function, and this is equal to the domain of the inverse function. Like the domain and the range flip places for the function versus the inverse function. It's just here they're all 0 to infinity, so I can't tell you anything particularly interesting. Although this is kind of cool. Look at this. So here's y equals x squared. We can start to see what the graph looks like for the inverse function if we plot it using y and x. It's the same kind of shape but flipped over, right? So anyway, are we done talking about inverse functions? Obviously not, right? Do you not want me to talk about this for another half hour Thursday? I think you definitely do, because this is on the test next week, right? So you need to come to an understanding. Next week? Thursday. Quiz? We have bonus quiz this Thursday, but the test is not super far off, and this is definitely on the next test. So it's not. I write a course planner for a reason, so we can look at it and know when the next test is. So what's that? I will send an announcement about that, but it will be like 3 or 4 problems from the test. Not exactly the same, but same ideas. You turn it off. Thanks.